3 minutes. That was how long it took for the pride of the British Royal Navy to become a steel tomb at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. 1,415 men vanished in an explosion so violent it was seen from miles away. Only 3 sailors survived to tell the story. On May 24, 1941, the world witnessed one of the most brutal naval duels in history. HMS Hood versus the Bismarck. HMS Hood was not just any ship. It was the living symbol of British naval power, the most famous ship in the Royal Navy. This battlecruiser had been built by John Brown and Company at the Clydebank shipyards in Scotland, launched on August 22, 1918, and commissioned on May 15, 1920. Its construction had cost £6 million sterling, an astronomical fortune at the time, equivalent to more than $300 million today. With a standard displacement of 42,100 tons, a length of 263 meters, and a beam of 31.5 meters, it was the largest battlecruiser in the world. Its 4 Brown Curtis turbines generated 144,000 horsepower, allowing it to reach speeds over 30 knots. Sailors called it the Mighty Hood, and for millions of Britons, it was invincible. Its 8 main guns, each 381 millimeters in diameter, could fire shells nearly 1.5 meters long and weighing as much as a small car, at distances over 20 kilometers. For 21 years, it had sailed every ocean in the world flying the British flag. It had visited every continent, participated in royal ceremonies, and welcomed emperors and presidents. For ordinary people, seeing the Hood was like seeing Great Britain itself sailing across the seas. But in the German shipyards, the Nazis had built a war machine that would change everything. The Bismarck was the most modern and lethal battleship in the world in 1941. This Bismarck-class battleship had been built by Blohm and Voss in Hamburg, launched on February 14, 1939, and commissioned on August 24, 1940. With only 8 months of active service, it was practically brand new. With a standard displacement of 41,700 tons and a full load displacement of 50,300 tons, a length of 251 meters, and a beam of 36 meters, it was the largest battleship ever built by Germany. Its 3 Blohm and Voss turbines generated 150,000 horsepower, giving it a top speed of 30 knots. Its armor weighed more than 19,000 tons, about 40% of its total weight. Its 8 main guns of 381 millimeters could pierce the thickest armor ever built. Its mission was simple but devastating: break the British naval blockade and sink every merchant ship it encountered in the Atlantic. This operation, named Rheinübung, or Rhine Exercise, had been planned for months by the German High Command. If successful, it could cut off the supply lines keeping Britain in the war and force the British to surrender through starvation. On the morning of May 24, 1941, the waters of the Denmark Strait were cold and gray. The Hood was sailing alongside the battleship Prince of Wales when, at 5:35 a.m., the lookouts shouted the words everyone feared: "Enemy ships in sight!" The silhouettes of the Bismarck and the heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen appeared on the horizon like steel ghosts. Vice Admiral Lancelot Holland, commander of the British force, knew he had to act quickly. The Hood had a fatal flaw: its horizontal armor was weak. If the Bismarck managed to fire from the right distance, its shells could plunge down and pierce the Hood's deck as if it were paper. Holland ordered full speed ahead to close the gap as fast as possible and reduce the plunging angle of the enemy fire. It was a race against time. Whoever landed the first effective shot would win the battle. Holland bet the lives of over 1,400 men that the Hood could close the distance before taking a deadly hit. At the start of the engagement, the Hood and the Bismarck were more than 20 kilometers apart. That distance was deadly for the British cruiser. At long range, shells follow a high arc and fall almost vertically. That allows them to hit the upper deck of the enemy, exactly where the Hood was most vulnerable. Its horizontal armor was thin, built to resist direct fire, not plunging hits. Vice Admiral Holland knew this, which is why he ordered the ships to close the distance fast. By the time the Bismarck fired its first salvo, the range had closed to around 15 kilometers. It was a race against physics, and physics won. At 5:52 a.m., the Hood opened fire. Its guns roared like thunder and orange flames lit up the gray Arctic sky. British shells flew through the icy air but fell near the Bismarck without hitting it. The Germans replied 3 minutes later, at 5:55. Captain Ernst Lindemann had trained his crew for this very moment. The Bismarck fired its first salvo at 5:55. 8 shells, each 381 millimeters in diameter, hurtled toward the Hood at nearly 800 meters per second. The first salvo missed, but the German fire control team quickly adjusted their aim. Inside the Bismarck's fire control center, officers watched through powerful rangefinders, calculating distance, target speed, heading, and wind direction. The data was processed by advanced aiming systems that precisely guided the main turrets. The Hood was steaming at full speed, its engines pushed to the limit. Black smoke from its funnels mixed with the vapor of its own gunfire. British sailors knew they were in danger, but they trusted their ship. For decades, the Hood had been untouchable. What they didn't know was that the Bismarck was using next-generation armor-piercing shells, designed to destroy even the toughest defenses. At exactly 6 a.m., the Bismarck fired its fifth salvo. This time, the calculations were perfect. The German shells traced a deadly arc across the Arctic sky. One struck the rear gun turret of the Hood, another pierced its deck near the second funnel. What followed was a chain of events lasting only seconds, but it changed naval history. The German shell penetrated several decks until it reached the ammunition magazine. The explosion was so powerful that a column of fire and black smoke rose more than 500 meters into the air. The Hood broke in two. Sailors aboard the Prince of Wales, just 800 meters away, witnessed the horror. Captain John Leach later described how he saw the Hood rise from the sea as if an invisible force had pushed it from below. The bow lifted while the stern disappeared. In less than 3 minutes, the pride of the Royal Navy disintegrated. Ted Briggs, Bob Tilburn, and William Dundas were the only 3 survivors. They were near the bridge when the explosion occurred. Briggs, only 18 years old, later recalled how he felt the ship rise beneath him, then vanish. The freezing Atlantic waters began pulling everything down. The 3 young men fought for their lives in a sea covered with wreckage and oil. Briggs clung to a piece of floating wood. Tilburn and Dundas swam as best they could. The water was just 2 degrees Celsius. The bodies of hundreds of sailors slowly disappeared beneath the waves. For 2 hours, they held on. They watched their comrades die, one by one. Finally, a British destroyer, HMS Electra, rescued them. They would be the only living witnesses to the tragedy. Admiral Holland died with his ship. His last order had been a change of course to close the gap. Captain Ralph Kerr also died, along with 1,412 sailors. Men who had served for years vanished in less time than it takes to make a cup of coffee. From the Bismarck, German sailors watched with a mix of pride and shock. They had succeeded in sinking the enemy's most iconic ship, but had also witnessed the deaths of over 1,000 men. Captain Lindemann ordered a minute of silence for the fallen. Even in war, some gestures transcend flags. The news of the sinking reached the British Admiralty within hours. Winston Churchill received the report in disbelief. The Hood was a national symbol. Its loss was a military disaster and a moral wound for all of Britain. But they did not surrender. The order was clear: sink the Bismarck. Every available ship in the North Atlantic joined the hunt. The German battleship had to pay for its victory. For 74 hours, from May 24 to May 27, the Bismarck sailed pursued by the largest concentration of British warships ever deployed against a single target. Cruisers, destroyers, aircraft carriers, and battleships converged from all directions. On the night of May 26, torpedo bombers from the carrier Ark Royal damaged its rudder. The Bismarck was left circling, out of control. At dawn the next day, the battleships Rodney and King George V caught up with it. At 10:36 a.m. on May 27, with the ship on fire, its guns silent, and surrounded, the Germans opened the scuttling valves. The Bismarck sank with more than 2,000 men aboard. Only 115 survived. Just 3 days earlier, the Hood had met the same fate. More than 3,500 lives were lost in under a week. The sinking of the Hood changed naval warfare. The British learned that no ship was invulnerable. The Germans, that victory could come at a terrible price. The Battle of the Denmark Strait stands as a warning. In the age of modern war, power and technology decide the fate of thousands, in just a few minutes. If you enjoyed this video about the pride of the British Navy, please like, comment, and subscribe.